The rain had been falling for hours, thin and steady, tapping on the corrugated roof of the small, dimly lit house. Inside, Akira sat on the edge of a worn futon, staring at the floor as if it held the answers he had been searching for all his life. His hands, rough and callous from years of labor, trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of a silence that had grown unbearable. He was 29, yet life had carved lines on his face that made him look far older. His mother's voice, once a warm echo in the hallways of their home, was now just a memory, fragile and fading. She had passed away a year ago, leaving him alone with a father who spoke more in sighs than words, and a debt that seemed impossible to repay. The world outside was indifferent, a blur of gray skies and puddled streets. Akira had tried to run from it, to escape the relentless pressure that pushed him down, but life had a way of catching up. He had been fired from his job at the factory last week. The factory, his lifeline, had closed overnight, leaving him with nothing but broken dreams and a stack of unpaid bills that leaned against the wall like silent, judgmental witnesses. He remembered the first time he had realized how fragile life could be. He had been 10, watching his father collapse under the weight of a similar misfortune, a business lost, a home at risk, and yet, somehow, his father had kept moving. Akira had asked him once, "How do you keep going when it feels like everything is gone?" His father's eyes, tired but steady, had looked past him and whispered a word that would follow Akira for the rest of his life. Gaman. It was not a word of hope, exactly, nor of resignation. It was something deeper, a quiet, unyielding strength. To endure. To persist, even when every part of you wants to fall apart. To hold the line when the world seems determined to break you. Akira had nodded that day, not fully understanding. But now, sitting in the darkness of his empty home, he felt the full weight of it. His mother's laughter haunted the corners of the room, a cruel reminder of everything he had lost. The bills piled up. The threats of eviction loomed. And yet, he could not stop. Not yet. There was a knock at the door. Startled, he rose slowly, the floorboards creaking beneath his feet. At the doorway stood a small boy, no older than 6, drenched from the rain. His eyes were wide, desperate, and familiar. Akira's heart clenched. It was his nephew, Riku, the son of his younger sister, who had disappeared months ago, leaving the boy in Akira's reluctant care. I didn't know where else to go," the boy whispered, shivering. Akira's chest tightened. He had promised himself he would protect Riku, yet here they were, 2 souls lost in the storm. Akira pulled the boy inside, wrapping a threadbare blanket around him. He sat back down on the futon, feeling the weight of responsibility pressed down like a mountain on his shoulders. He had no money, no plan, and yet he could not let Riku see despair. Not him. Not after all he had already lost. The night stretched on, punctuated by the sound of rain and the occasional groan of the old house. Akira stared at the flickering candlelight, thinking about the road ahead. There were no shortcuts, no miracles waiting in the wings. Only the hard truth: endure, survive, keep moving. Gaman. He remembered the stories his father had told him as a boy, stories of people who had faced impossible odds and kept going. Of a man who carried water for days to save his village. Of a woman who worked through illness, hunger, and loss, and never gave up. Akira's eyes burned with a mixture of sorrow and determination. If they could survive, so could he. But even as he clung to that thought, fear gnawed at him. What if he failed? What if he could not protect Riku? What if the world finally crushed them both, leaving nothing behind but memories and regret? The candle flickered again, shadows dancing across the walls like silent witnesses. Akira knew he could not stay here, in this quiet despair, any longer. He had to move, to act, to find a way forward, even if the path was invisible, even if every step threatened to break him. He looked down at Riku, asleep in the blanket, and made a silent vow. "I won't let anything take you from me," he whispered, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "No matter what. I will endure. I will survive. I will find a way." At that moment, a loud crash echoed from outside. The old roof had given way under the weight of the rain. Water poured into the corner of the room, soaking the floor, the blankets, everything. Akira's heart raced. The storm was no longer just outside, it was here, inside their fragile sanctuary. He grabbed Riku, sprinting to the center of the room, but the water was rising faster than he could manage. Panic clawed at him, but he forced it down, forcing his legs to move, forcing his mind to focus. One misstep, and it would all be over, and then, just as suddenly, the power went out. Darkness swallowed them. Akira could hear Riku crying softly, terrified, and his own pulse thundering in his ears. Every instinct screamed at him to give up, to collapse under the weight of it all. But he couldn't. Not now. He felt something hard and unyielding inside him. A memory, a word, a promise. Gaman. With trembling hands, Akira grabbed the boy closer and shouted over the roar of the storm. "Hold on, Riku! We will get through this!" The candle, extinguished by the draft, left them in darkness. The house groaned, the rain pounded, and yet inside that darkness, Akira felt a spark of something powerful, almost alive. He could not see it yet, but he could feel it. The secret strength of those who never give up, the silent, invisible force that carried people through storms far worse than this. And as the water rose around them, and the night pressed down like a living thing, Akira realized something that chilled him to the bone. Endurance was not enough. This storm would demand everything from him, and he might not survive. But if he failed, Riku would be lost too. And Akira had promised. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the boy harder. His heart, though terrified, burned with a fierce resolve. The storm was not finished. The night was not over, and neither was he. The night stretched on, unyielding and cruel. Rain hammered the fragile roof like a drum of judgment, each drop a reminder of how fragile their world had become. Akira clutched Riku to his chest, shivering not from the cold, but from the fear that gnawed at his mind. The house creaked ominously, walls groaning under the relentless storm, and every shadow seemed alive with threats he could not name. Hours felt like days. They huddled in the center of the room, soaked, cold, and exhausted. Riku whimpered in his sleep, murmuring words Akira could barely understand, fragments of dreams and fear colliding in the darkness. Akira's own mind refused rest. He thought of their empty pantry, the unpaid rent, the factory that had abandoned him. He thought of his sister, gone without a trace, leaving this fragile boy behind. And he thought of his mother, whose gentle hands had once soothed every wound in the house, now only a ghost in his memory. He had always believed strength was a matter of muscle, of action. But now he understood it differently. True strength, the kind that endured storms and life itself, was something quieter, something deeper. Gaman. Endure even when it hurts. Persist, even when the world demands you break. The storm finally began to wane, leaving the room damp and battered, but not yet safe. Water had pulled across the floor, soaking their clothes and blankets. Akira carefully moved Riku to a small corner away from the worst of the flood, trying to dry him as best he could. Every motion felt exhausting, as though the simplest tasks required all the energy he had left. By morning, the storm had passed, but the devastation remained. The roof had partially collapsed, watermarks ran down the walls, and the small house they called home looked more like a tomb than a sanctuary. Akira stepped outside, surveying the neighborhood. Other houses had fared worse. The streets were empty except for debris, fallen branches, and the occasional neighbor whose face mirrored his own despair. But despair was useless now. Survival demanded action. He started by checking the pantry, hoping for some forgotten food. Nothing. Only the meager remains of yesterday's rice, soaked and spoiled. He remembered the small convenience store at the edge of the street, a place he had passed 1,000 times but never thought to rely on. It was a half-mile walk through puddles, through mud, through a city that seemed determined to crush anyone foolish enough to keep moving. He considered giving up. For a moment, the weight of it all, the loss, the fear, the endless uncertainty, pressed him to the ground. But then he felt Riku's small hand clutch his sleeve, sleepy eyes trusting him, needing him. He could not, would not fail. Not now. Not ever. So he moved. Step by step, soaked to the bone, feet slipping in the mud, Akira pushed forward. Every muscle screamed in protest. Every gust of wind threatened to knock him down. Every thought whispered surrender. And every time, he forced himself to breathe, to endure, to remember Gaman. When he reached the store, he found it damaged, shelves overturned, and supplies scarce. Other survivors were there, desperate and wary, eyeing him with suspicion and silent competition for what little remained. Akira didn't speak much. He simply collected a few cans, some bread, and bottles of water. Small victories, but enough for today. Enough to keep Riku alive another day. Returning home, he encountered the next challenge, the roof. The water was still dripping, pooling dangerously around the foundation. He had no tools, no money for repairs, only raw determination. He ripped old boards from broken furniture, patched holes as best he could, working long past exhaustion while Riku watched with wide, anxious eyes. He spoke little, but the boy could feel his resolve, the quiet pulse of endurance that seemed to radiate from him, unshakable. Days turned into weeks. Each day brought new challenges, neighbors desperate for help, the threat of illness, Riku's quiet hunger, the relentless pressure of debt. Akira's body ached. His spirit teetered on the brink. And yet he moved forward. Slowly, painfully, but forward. One evening, as he patched another leak in the roof, a neighbor approached him. A woman, older, worn from life, yet her eyes carried recognition. "You're the one who stayed," she said softly. "When everyone else left, you didn't. You endure." Akira didn't respond at first. The words were heavy, unfamiliar. Recognition, even in passing, felt alien. But then he realized something. Endurance was not only survival. It was example. It was showing others that even in darkness, persistence mattered. Even in despair, there was a path forward. Riku, standing beside him, mimicked the neighbor's quiet smile. It was small, fragile, but real. Akira felt a warmth in his chest that he had not felt since his mother's death. He understood now that Gaman was not just about holding on for himself. It was about holding on for those who could not yet hold on for themselves. But the world was still harsh. One evening, a letter arrived, official and cruel. The bank had issued notice for eviction. They had 2 weeks. Akira's stomach sank, but he clenched the letter tightly. He could not give in. He would find a way. He would endure. Gaman.as he lay down that night, exhausted but unbroken. He thought of all the people who had survived far worse, whose stories had been told and retold in whispers, in quiet nods, in the silent passing of generations. Their strength was not in grand gestures, but in the quiet refusal to give up, in the determination to endure even when nothing seemed possible. Akira made a silent promise, a vow he could almost taste in the cold night air. He would survive this storm. He would protect Riku. And he would find a way to rebuild, not because it was easy, but because the strength of those who endure was a force that no storm, no darkness, could ever destroy. And yet, even as he felt this spark of determination, a new challenge loomed on the horizon, one that would test every ounce of his endurance. One that would push him to the edge of despair and demand a strength he did not yet know he possessed. A letter slid under the door early the next morning, the envelope thick and official, with a symbol he knew too well. It was from the authorities. Akira unfolded it with shaking hands and his heart stopped. The city was planning to demolish the entire block, including their small, battered home. Riku clutched his hand, looking up with wide, innocent eyes. Akira swallowed hard. The storm had ended, but the real fight was only beginning. And in that moment, he understood the full truth of Gaman. Endurance was not passive. It demanded action, courage, and the willingness to face the impossible head-on. The secret strength of those who never give up was about to be tested, and Akira would have to rise or be lost forever. The morning sun broke through the gray clouds, but it brought no warmth. The city smelled of wet concrete and decay, the streets still littered with debris from the storm. Akira stood outside his battered home, Riku clinging to his side, staring at the official notice in his hands. Demolition in 3 days. 3 days to save a life, a home, a future. For a long moment he said nothing. He only breathed, listening to Riku's soft heartbeat against his chest. The boy's trust weighed on him more heavily than any storm, any loss, any fear. Akira had endured hardship before, but now he understood that endurance alone was not enough. Strength must take shape. Action must follow resolve. Gaman was the seed, but it needed work, courage, and sweat to grow into something that could withstand the world. He remembered his father's words again: endure, persist, survive, but never forget why you endure. Akira had endured the storm, the hunger, the fear, but this was different. This was a choice. He could give in, let them tear everything away, or he could fight. Not for pride, not for glory, but for the boy who had no choice but to follow him, for the memory of the mother he had loved, and for the life he refused to surrender. The first step was the hardest: asking for help. Akira walked to the city hall, carrying Riku, the eviction papers clutched tightly in his other hand. He waited in line, heartsick and nervous, surrounded by people who stared with indifference or mild curiosity. But he did not falter. He spoke to officials, pleaded, explained, every word laced with desperation yet controlled by a quiet force that came from the marrow of his being. Days passed like this, a flurry of meetings, phone calls, small miracles, and crushing setbacks. Some doors closed with cold finality. Others opened just enough for a ray of hope. Akira slept little, ate less, his body aching with fatigue, but he refused to yield. Every night, he returned to Riku's side, telling him stories, keeping the boy's laughter alive amidst the chaos. On the second day, a breakthrough came. One of the city planners, a man older, with the same quiet strength that Akira recognized in his father, offered a compromise. The building could be saved, temporarily, if Akira agreed to organize the neighborhood, to show that the community could support its residents through recovery and rebuilding. It was impossible. But it was also a chance. Akira took it. He rallied neighbors, cleaned streets, patched roofs, and organized volunteers. He coordinated donations, arranged temporary housing, and worked alongside people who had once ignored him. Slowly, the community began to see him not just as a survivor, but as a leader, a symbol of endurance. Each small victory was a spark against despair, and each step forward was a testament to the quiet, relentless force that Gaman demanded. Through it all, Riku never left his side. The boy watched Akira struggle, fall, and rise again, absorbing lessons that no classroom could ever teach. He learned to hold on when the world seemed unbearable, to trust those who fight even when the odds are stacked, to endure, and in that endurance, to find the courage to act. The final day arrived. Officials returned to inspect the block, prepared to enforce the demolition. Akira stood before them, sweat and grime streaking his face, hands trembling but voice unwavering. He presented the evidence of the neighborhood's efforts, the community's support, and the unyielding spirit that had kept his small family alive through the storm. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the planner who had once given him the chance nodded. The demolition was postponed. Temporary repairs were approved. Riku's home, his safe place, was saved. Akira sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Not from relief alone, but from the sheer, human weight of endurance. He held Riku close, feeling the boy's small heartbeat steady against his own. The storm outside had passed, but the storm within had been conquered in a way that would never fade. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to a fragile rhythm. Akira worked tirelessly to rebuild, to strengthen, to prepare for whatever trials would come next. And yet, in the quiet moments, watching Riku play in the sunlight, hearing neighbors laugh as they repaired their homes, feeling the gentle warmth of a life reclaimed, he understood something profound. True strength was not in the absence of struggle, but in the refusal to let struggle define you. Gaman was not passive. It was not mere survival. It was a choice to endure, to act, to carry hope like a torch even when the night seemed endless. It was the secret strength of those who never give up, the invisible force that turns despair into resilience, loneliness into connection, fear into courage. Years later, Akira would tell Riku this story, not in words, but in the life he had built. A life of perseverance, of quiet courage, of relentless endurance. A life that showed the boy what it truly meant to face the impossible, and keep moving forward. And Riku, now grown, would remember not just the storm, the rain, or the destruction, but the man who never gave up, who endured everything for love, for duty, for life itself. And in that memory, he would carry the same strength forward, knowing that even when the world seems unkind, there is a secret power in those who refuse to surrender. The house still bore the marks of that fateful storm, the warped wood, the patched roof, the scars on the walls. But to Akira, every imperfection was a testament to endurance, to courage, to Gaman. And in that testament, he had found something far greater than survival. He had found meaning. A life worth fighting for. A life worth enduring. A life worth living. The secret strength of those who never give up is not a story of heroes. It is a story of ordinary people, faced with impossible odds, choosing to endure, and in that choice, becoming extraordinary.